Good morning, and this is Catherine Cooper with the Sustainability Learning Center, and welcome to the Green Information Technology webinar with Dave Shirley and Rich Maltzman. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction here before we get started. As you do sign on, please introduce yourself in the chat bar and let us know a little bit about yourself and what you most hope to learn today. Just a little bit of background, the Sustainability Learning Center is a learning and networking hub for sustainability, and we're all about professional development and skill certification around sustainability and green core competencies. And we do that through instructor-led courses, both online and face-to-face, these lunch and learns, skill certification, e-learning modules. We have about 51 of them, and through this Sustainability Learning Network, which is on the back end of our website, where you will find lots of free information and past webinars that are available for you to check out. If you're looking for some great courses over the summer, we are doing one called Inspiring Engagement in Sustainability, and this is a really fun program where we actually have speakers who are inspirational and how they talk about how they inspire people within their companies to be engaged in sustainability. So that's happening in July. We're also doing our Green Team Gap Assessment Program, and some of the upcoming programs that we have, including our Sustainability Consulting Projects courses coming in October, Green Project Management, which Dave and Rich also do, that starts on October the 8th. And this Green IT program is going to be in a 8-week certificate program starting October the 29th. So that would be something that might be of interest as you learn more about this today. And as I say, we will be putting our recordings to all our webinars on the back end of our website, so you can go there and see those. And so I'm just going to take a moment now and introduce you to our two experts. So I'd like to introduce you to Dave Shirley, who is a project management professional. He's been an instructor and consultant with more than 30 years experience in management and project management in corporate, public, and small business arenas. And he's presented at such prestigious organizations as the Conference Board and PMI Global Congress. And Dave also focuses on consulting and teaching at the graduate level in a number of institutions, Boston University, Southern New Hampshire University, and he's also been involved with Northern Essex Community College and New England College. And Dave also has a BA in Geology and Honors MBA, and he's a distinguished member of the technical staff with AT&T Lucent Technologies Laboratories. And Rich Maltzman, who's going to have a few slides along the way too, is Dave's partner in crime. And Rich has been an engineer. He's also a professional project manager and is an engineer since 1989 and a project manager since 1988, including 2 recent assignments in the Netherlands, where he helped to build project management teams overseeing the deployment of telecom networks in Europe and the Middle East. And he has also been teaching at Boston College and Merrimack College and Northern Essex Community College. And he also did a huge project for the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta back in 1996, and has worked on the integration of the PMO with 2 large corporations as well. So with that, I'm going to switch over to our main presentation and just click through these a couple of slides here, and I'm going to pass the ball over to you, Dave. If I can find you. There you are. Oops, I just passed it to the wrong person, I think. All right.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Yeah. What we'd like to do, I just want to give you a brief look at what today's objectives are, introduce you to Green IT, talk about the importance of Green IT to the enterprise and the bottom line specifically, and then we'll look at some things that you as a project manager and as a consumer can do to drive the greening of IT. I'd like to turn it over now to Rich to talk a little bit about it. Let me give you the ball, Rich. As soon as I find you, I would like Catherine. You're down a little bit. There you go. Okay, Rich.
Yeah,
you lost Rich?
I'm here. No, you didn't.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you have the ball now.
A little bit of mystery there. Okay, so as Dave said, the objectives of this seminar today to introduce you to Green IT, explain why it's important to your enterprise, whether that's a for-profit, non-profit enterprise, still an enterprise, overall and to the bottom line, and to talk about what your contribution can be as a project manager. So green is about more than the environment. In fact, we prefer to just talk about sustainability. As Catherine has named her organization, the Sustainability Learning Center, we focus now much more on green. Our first book was called Green Project Management, but our upcoming book will have the word sustainability in the title. It's about the triple bottom line, that encompassing, that being the bottom line that encompasses not only ecological or green aspects, but also economic and social aspects as well. So as far as sustainability is concerned, what is it? Sustainability is really defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs, their own needs. You could actually add the word their own needs. This is a standard definition that's also used globally, but we like one very short one, and we actually have our own twist on it. It comes from a book called Getting Green Done by Auden Schindler, and his definition is staying in business forever, or at least acting as if we'll be in business forever. Not only caring about the bottom line of next week or the next quarter, but what would happen if we are concerned about the bottom line in 2025, for example. And then the U.S. EPA defines this as the principle that everything we need for our survival and well-being depends either directly or indirectly on our natural environment. So I won't read the entire definition, but that's an important element to definition as well. And as you know, the U.S. EPA has made news with increased carbon restrictions on power plants recently. So ecological, political, and social factors contributing to green project management. And then I'm going to hand it back to Dave to talk a little bit about green IT in particular. And you'll have me again shortly to talk about some of the specific aspects, but right now I'm handing it back to Dave.
So the question is, what is green IT? And in order to do that, let's break it down. My advance is not working right now. Hold on. Okay. Sorry about that. There we go. So let's break it down and talk about what is IT first. IT is that information. So it starts with your data that you get in, and then you put in some sort of context, and then information technology is what you use then to take that information to the next level. And then it translates into a meaning, then knowledge, then insight, then wisdom. So IT itself sits in a very important place. So green IT then is I'm sorry, somebody came in. So I mean, continuing to talk about what IT is, and then we'll get to. I want to let a little basis down before we get to green IT. So it is the technology itself, and that includes data center, your infrastructure, which is your power, your cooling, and also all the equipment, and then inside of the data center, and then all the user equipment, the desktops, laptops, thin clients that we talked about earlier, when Catherine and I were having a quick conversation about thin clients and laptops and computers. But it also includes business processes, IT governance, and all those other things that go along with corporate. And when you think about what's happening these days with information systems and how much information we're processing, we talk about petabytes, we talk about exabytes, we talk about zettabytes. And just to show you a zettabyte, that's the number 1 times 10 to the 21st. So and it just keeps increasing and increasing and increasing the amount of data that we need to deal with. So therefore, all the equipment, the infrastructure that we need also continues to increase exponentially. So and think about electronic transactions now. Almost everything we do revolves around. I mean, everybody's encouraging all your bills. Those companies are encouraging you to go quote unquote paperless and use the internet, use delivery through any of those alternate ways. Online shopping, electronic medical records, hospitals, doctors' offices, everybody's going to that EMR, trying to get, again, a paperless office. Global positioning system, GPS, how much data that uses. Huge amounts of data are coming in order to Google Earth, for instance, in order to do those kind of things. So this is, and again, during our kind of pre-webinar discussion, we talk about no matter how much we can get into a cloud, there's still something behind the cloud equipment that is going to be generating energy needs and hardware. There's just no way to get around it. The government, again, is now growing exponentially with their information data centers, huge amounts of documentation that are being processed. I mean, just think about in the U.S. how many people file income tax, and that is now electronically. A lot of it is done electronically. And there's a certain amount of backup that's needed. There's a certain amount of disaster recovery should a data center go down. There's all kinds of emergency services that we need to have on computers, and so the data centers for the government in the government sector is just blossoming. And scientific computing, when you think about some of the big number crunching that has to be done, that needs equipment also. So and green IT or IT itself is the big factor here. And when we look to energy usage, we can think about a few things. We can think about how much it costs just to use the energy, and I have some slides later on that talk a little bit about that. We talk about the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions that come out, the carbon emissions that come out of that energy use. We think about the power grid that we have and rolling brownouts, and because we just can't, the infrastructure, because of the capital costs on infrastructure is so expensive, we can't continually upgrade and add new power grid components, power lines. There just isn't enough room on the planet to get everything that we're going to need in the future to run on these wires. So we need to be much more efficient. So that's some of the implications of the energy usage. Since I just did this kind of as a computer thing, since IT is a key to modern business, and the way we use energy is unsustainable. The way we're using energy now is unsustainable. I know there's a lot of arguments that say we've got lots of coal, we've got lots of natural gas, we've got lots of stuff will last a long time. It's still not sustainable if we look to the future and we use the Brundtland definition of sustainability. It's just not sustainable. So therefore, green IT is about using IT more efficiently to protect those scarce resources and improve the bottom line. So reducing energy usage translates directly to the bottom line. So here's some energy costs, and I'm not sure if you know, these kind of things change day to day depending on commodities, but I just thought I'd throw some of these facts up there about energy usage. So you can see that some areas, Montreal, for instance, looks like a fairly reasonable, and I guess you probably know why Montreal would be fairly reasonable. Hydro is the least expensive of any kind of energy producer that we have. You can say, okay, solar is free because of the sun, but there's still equipment that, and wind power is free, but still there's equipment that has to go. So hydro is pretty good, but remember there's this movement to reduce hydroelectric dams to free up rivers for the environment, and all those kind of things. So hydro may start to get fairly expensive. And when you look at the energy in the UK and in Europe, in Belgium, and the Netherlands, for instance, it gets fairly expensive, especially when you translate what the euro against the US dollar. So it gets fairly expensive. So that's why the big thing is that you can sell green IT to your management, because you can reduce energy costs with it, and by reducing energy costs, you now get savings to the bottom line, and everybody understands that, especially management understands saving to the bottom line. Although we'll use cost savings to justify, and also to not just necessarily justify, but as we like to think of saving the environment, and also the social issues that go around, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But you can use cost is one of those things that everybody understands at the executive level. They may not understand as much of the other triple bottom line sustainability issues. So according to US EPA, energy use has doubled from 2000 to 2006 on data centers. Think about Google, Microsoft, Amazon, eBay, all those major internet users that have equipment. There's over 1 million servers that Google has. Same, about 1 million with Microsoft. So huge. And according to IDC, for every dollar spent on hardware, 70% will be spent on power and cooling. So that's why we focus a lot on power and cooling, but there's a whole lot of other things that can affect the power and cooling, the energy savings, and that we're going to talk about a little bit too. So some of the strategies and goals around green IT, minimizing building footprint. And if we go back to the slide that Rich talked about, when we talked about the triple bottom line, we talked about society, aspects around society, aspects around the environment. And you think about minimizing a building footprint, using less of the space, so it gives you more space for things like water percolation, being able, so the more you the more you cover with asphalt, the less likely you have that you'll get the recharging groundwater, aquifers, and those kind of things. Also, minimizing the impact of the different building materials. So these are all considerations in strategies. Sustainable landscaping, so landscaping design. And what I want to do is I want to empower you as not only either IT professionals or IT professionals and project managers or project managers, I'd like to empower you to take the overall view of green IT and sustainability. So, you know, when planning a project for a data center upgrade or a new data center, we'll talk about sustainable landscaping. We'll talk about waste recycling. We'll talk about catalytic converters on generators to help save some of those emissions. We'll talk about using alternate energies, solar, wind, and then we'll also talk about when you're purchasing new equipment or upgrading equipment, take a look at what's available for efficiencies of those equipment. And even though in short run, sometimes it's a little bit more expensive to do that, in the long run, it's very easy. We've done some ROI, return on investment studies that recover costs of energy savings in 3 months, 2 months. Some it takes as long as a year, but all can usually be looked at in terms of cost savings in the long run if you can get out of the short-term thinking. Other things to consider: server consolidation, virtualization. Computers generally are only running at about 20% efficiency. So if you can consolidate some of your server usage to make those CPUs more efficient, that's one way that's one strategy. Cloud computing, again, I talked about that there is hardware behind it, but the availability, the advantage of cloud computing is that you can kind of consolidate a lot of those things and make those servers, computers much more efficient by consolidation. We can also use more sustainable hardware and efficient heating and cooling. One of just a quick aside, one of the big things that came out of the first efforts to be sustainable in a computer room is that they turned the computers so that they were face-to-face and back-to-back. So what happened was we created cold aisles and warm aisles, and it was much more efficient to remove the hot air rather than, if you remember, the old computers used to be face back, face back, face back. So just by turning them around, they increased a lot of efficiencies in the heating and cooling of those computers, making cold aisles and warm aisles. Other problems with computing equipment, with green data equipment, is a lot of them contain certain hazardous substances. A lot of them consume a lot more power than they should. There's a lot of heat generated. Inefficient power supply usage generates the waste product from energy is heat. So the more heat the less efficient a product is, the more heat that it'll put out as a waste product. And then there's always that equipment disposal, and we'll talk a little bit about these as we go along. Some of the hazardous substances that you run into: lead, mercury, cadmium, hexavalent chromium, PBB, PBDE, nickel, all those kind of things are in. And if you look now at some of the computer manufacturers, there are efforts to reduce a lot of this. PBB, PBDE, those things that fire retardants, So they're reducing some, putting a more sustainable fire retardant material in more sustainable. Mercury has been one of the success. We've removed a lot of mercury out of our PC boards and those kind of things. So this is some of those things that are. Let me stop for a second and just take a look at that KPIs that can we look at from monitoring perspective. Key performance indicators. The first thing, well, let me hold that question. It's a great question. I think I'll be able to answer that a little bit later when we talk a little bit more about measuring and managing. If not, we'll revisit that. So just to give you a perspective, the IT industry accounts for about 2% of the global CO2 emissions, which is about the same as the airline industry. So that just to give you a little bit of perspective, 2% of the global CO2 emissions. So it's a pretty significant amount. Some ways to reduce power consumption, energy audits. You need to measure to manage, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Virtualization, and also consider generating your own power. I know that Google in their campuses in the West, because they're conducive to sun, they can. I don't think it works so well in the Northeast, especially the far Northeast. Our sun just doesn't come out as much, so it's not out as much. Let's put it that way. And the winter time comes and snow falls and a little difficult, but they're in some places generating your own power. Again, I talked about thermal waste is energy out, so the heat out, electrical power in, electrical power out, and then heat as a thermal loss. If you're going to, this partially answers the question on of the KPIs. The first thing you need to do is decide where you want to concentrate your efforts. You need to establish some sort of border. You can take on all of it if you want to. I suggest you start small, maybe looking at your upstream impacts, suppliers, your electrical utility. Probably the best place that you can get most of your data is a direct impact. What kind of cooling systems do you use? What kind of transportation? Get some numbers on those. How efficient is your transportation system? Are you using diesel, electric? And remember, when you're measuring your direct impacts, there's really some indirect impacts that you need to consider too. For instance, if we're using electric cars, where are you getting your electricity from? So that's you can also look at your manufacturing, or you can look directly at your data center power, or you can look at the downstream impacts on your waste. And so I like to recommend that people start with the direct impacts, then look to downstream, and then look to upstream. But you need to establish those borders. There is some real savings. Efficiencies from virtualization. Use what you have. So sometimes it's better, because of the disposal issues, it might be better to upgrade than it is to change everything out. Maybe you can use what you have. There's bottom line savings and environmental savings from reduced power consumptions. So data center efficiency, again, here we're looking at, again, KPIs. We're kind of dancing around it, but we'll get to some of the definite KPIs in a second. But and I see Rich put up some some reference material too. 5 processes around data center efficiency. So if your concentration is on data centers, here's the 5 processes that you'll be looking at. First thing you do is diagnose the existing system. Measure and manage the existing systems that you have. Look at the cooling. Look to virtualization. Then do your build or upgrade or whatever you want. And then go back into the diagnostic mode. So to see what you can gain by doing those efficiencies. Carbon footprint. One of the ways to measure your efficiency is to use carbon footprinting. Tracking your carbon, calculate how much carbon you're using, analyze that, and then reporting. Look at the basics. So think of what the basics might be. Examine your operational impact. Then the 2 most important, the direct and indirect. Those are the 2 most important impacts that you have. And then you want to report this to someone that can make a difference. And that you need to do is determine who those key stakeholders are for reporting. It's interesting that software, the behavior of software, and this is a fascinating, to me, you have to understand where I'm coming from that perspective of sustainability and green IT. The software itself is a very interesting energy producer, energy user, energy saver. The behavior of that software can significantly improve or influence whether those energy-saving features that are built into the platform itself are effective or not. And what I want to do is I want to put software into perspective. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the ball over to Rich to talk about the rainbow of green and where software sits in that rainbow. So let me pass again. There you go.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So this is something that comes from the book that we wrote on green project management. One of the things we found as we did research and as we talked with companies and individuals in this area is that some projects are green just by their very nature, and some projects are green in a way that you'd have to almost dig to try to find that connection. So if you're Jacques Cousteau's grandson, who's out doing research to save coral reefs and has a project to do some of that research, that's clearly a green project by definition, or the building of a wind farm. Some of the projects where you can easily tell this is a green project. Those are green by definition projects. Then there are projects that are green by their impact of the project themselves. And an example of that might be the so-called Big Dig of Boston, where the impact of cutting into the central artery in Boston and burying a highway underneath the city, displacing lots of dirt and rodents and so forth and pollutants was significant. We're not even thinking about the end product of the new roads, but just the project itself. That's unlikely to be the case in an IT situation, but it's worth considering. Then further to the right is green by product impact, where whatever it is that you are doing, perhaps it's an upgrade of a data center, is going to have an impact over the long term. Our example there is the single-serve coffee maker, where the product itself may not have that much of an impact, but the product's outcome, these non-recyclable containers, K-cups in the case of the Keurig coffee maker, are being produced in the numbers of 11, 12, 13 billion. So it's important to consider the product impact. Now, this could be the case of your data center upgrade or any IT project in which you have to think about the use of the product in the longer term. And we'll actually I'll talk about it now just so I don't forget. I think it's an important point to make. I come from, and Dave also comes from, a telecom background. If you think about optical amplifiers, this little device that's turning on and off and sending a movie to your home over a fiber optic network, the manufacturer of that device may not be all that impactful, but the number of times it switches and the amount of times it's burning, the amount of energy it burns as it transits from a 0 to a 1 is significant. And there's an industry standard that's been introduced called BIPON. This is through an organization called Green Touch we may talk about later if we have time. And just by changing the protocol for this, the transition of an optical amplifier to an industry standard, this Green Touch organization was able to implement a protocol that's the equivalent of taking 500,000 cars off the road in terms of carbon impact, simply by changing an IT, which is in effect an IT protocol. As we move further to the right, we have projects which are green in general. These are the ones you might not be able to think about, and if you're a programmer and you're coming up with a new release of accounting software, here's where it might be harder to find that connection. But every project we assert has some green element to it. And we continued our analysis here with the idea that there's two scales here. Projects that are green by definition have a strong focus on sustainability, and you don't have to work as hard as a project manager to beat the drums, if you will, about sustainability. But as you move further and further to the right here to a project where it's hard to find that connection, the role, the sustainably oriented role of that IT project manager has to go up much more significantly. So if you find yourself on the right-hand side of this chart, which many of us do, we have to be sure we're, as I said, beating the drums and understanding ourselves and communicating clearly to others what the impact is of our project in the longer term. So if you just look a little closer at some of these, green by definition, green by project impact, product impact, or green in general, let's look at some examples from each very quickly. As I mentioned, Jacques Cousteau's grandson out there doing some biodiversity work, that's clearly an example. So is Desertec. We urge you to take a look at Desertec. It's a solar power project. But any of these are green by definition projects, one in which the role of the project manager as a sustainability promoter is well accepted and expected. And it's not as hard a job, frankly, because everyone is kind of on board. As you move further to the right here, green by project impact, like the Big Dig, drilling of a new oil rig, any large construction project would be examples of green by project impact. Then we have the Keurig coffee maker as an example, and this is a product, again, that we always say we were not in the boardroom when it was designed. We don't know the decisions that they made, but we know that they regret some of them because they've actually had to have apologies and rewording on their website about what they're doing to improve what we call the granality of the steady state use of that coffee maker. There's a whole field of analysis here called life cycle assessment you may want to look into, which assesses that product impact in the steady state and thinks about the long term of the product, not just the manufacture of the product, not just the selling of the product, but what happens when this toaster or washing machine or coffee maker or an IT center is used in its steady state. It goes back to the discussion on impact KPIs that we have been having on the side here. And then green in general, these are the ones where you are creating new software. There may be nothing inherently quote-unquote green or quote-unquote sustainable about the project, at least apparently at face value, but it's there because if you think past the product's deployment and put it into steady state and just project its use out in the longer term, even something as simple as I said, an optical amplifier in its steady state can have a significant impact. 500,000 cars are a lot of cars to take off the road simply by changing an IT protocol. So we want you to put on your long-term hat when you're a project manager to increase your ability to do a better job of being a sustainability-oriented contributor. With that, I'm going to hand the ball back to Dave so that he can take you through some of the aspects of software and the role of software here. So bear with me a moment. And Dave, you have the ball again.
Thanks, Rich. Software is, like I said, it's a very exciting piece of this puzzle for me because I never realized the impact that it had. Even though it's a virtual asset, people just kind of disregard it, but it can have a negative impact on the environment itself and how it's written. They kind of look at it. It may not necessarily disregard it, but it's kind of neutral because it's virtual because of its virtual nature. But if you think about it, software touches all three of those triple bottom line. So if you think about the society and the way people use software, the accessibility of and the ease of use is one of those, is a social aspect of it. It can save you money, and I'll show you a little bit about that. And then by being more efficient, not only can it save you money, but it also saves the environment. So you see that it covers all three of those triple bottom line. So when we look at some of the efficiencies that can be gained by the way we write our software, and I know that we may not have any coders on the call, software coders, but it's an interesting, at least the knowledge of the efficiencies in software is kind of interesting to have. For instance, in the computational efficiency, when people write software, the algorithms, the way they construct their algorithms to get work done quickly, when we say work gets done more quickly by using more efficient algorithms or faster algorithms, if we can get that work done more quickly, we use less energy. So again, the ball keeps rolling to those kind of things. And I'm not going to go into all the detail about this. You have this on the slide. If you're interested, there's lots of books on software efficiencies. Multi-threading, there's ability to use multiple cores in a computer system for your so that you're not running your software on one but on many cores. So again, it runs quicker, makes it more efficient. There's vectorization. There's microarchitectural tuning. Moving on to data efficiency. We can look at data at asynchronous I/O, native command queries, those kind of things that all in an effort to speed up the way that software operates, and therefore using less CPU time, and less CPU time translates directly into less energy usage. You can see where that's all going. Again, the efficiencies of AC versus DC versus AC power, power policies that are used in the contextual awareness, and then in the idle efficiency where data acquisition, C states where the how much rest in between the computer gets. So the more you can rest the CPU, the less energy you use. So I know it's a little bit kind of crazy to look at software in this detail, and I don't intend to do that. I just want to give you some direction into, if you're interested in software efficiencies, and also gaining a little bit of knowledge to speak to, because if you're developing or having some software developed, it's better to get it developed efficiently and so they can use efficiently. There are some software that happens out there that's available out there to help with some of the reduction in energy. Windows 7, Windows 8 power configuration, Intel has ways to measure the efficiencies of their software, and data acquisition tools like Fluke NetDAQ is another way to use software, also to check software to see how efficient it is. So bottom line is, what are some of the specifics that you can actually do to make a difference? One is green PCs, notebooks, and servers. Use your power management features. Turn off systems when not in use. Screensavers, particularly the ones that you've seen, the aquarium ones, they use a huge amount of energy. Any kind of motion within the screensaver. And thin clients, which is interesting if you have, we're looking into it at Boston University in our computer labs, because right now you might have a computer lab with 30 desktops in it, each one generating heat, power, power consumption. If you can move those to, and this is a reuse for monitors, if you can move to a thin client, have 30 thin clients as opposed to 30 desktops, you'll save a huge amount of data. And right now we're doing some management of some measurements on that to see if how much. The problem with a big university is that, and in downtown Boston, for instance, we don't know all of there's several energy suppliers. And so it's difficult to pin down which particular supplier is supplying which building. So that's the first step. Laptops. Again, reducing power processor speeds, underclocking. Sometimes you don't need that much computing power. And you can reduce that, and that reduces your energy. Defragging of your disks can help, because then rather than seeking information all over the disk, defragging it puts it all in one place so you can get it. Another way to do that is another way that software is doing that is that the most accessible, most needed programs are in the front, so that you don't have to seek deep into into a disk to find the program, therefore saving. I mean, we're talking about microseconds worth of saving, but when you multiply that all out, it comes out pretty substantial. Hibernate modes in standby, turning things off when you don't need it, and again using power management systems. Desktops, disposal. That's a big thing with desktops. I mean, I know people want the latest and greatest. So updating rather than upgrading and reusing. And the other is wake on LAN. So the magic packets at work that wake your computer up when things are important. So that's another a way to save energy on a laptop. Just a quick look at mobile devices. You know as well as I do that we all want the latest and greatest. So therefore, we change our mobile devices out. If you do it by contract, for me, Verizon every 2 years. Do I need it? Probably not. Do I want it? Oh, yeah. But let's talk about, look at the number of mobile devices that are out there. Switch them off. Unplug chargers. That's a little bit that we can save. Carbon offsets is another, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about carbon offsets because there's quite a bit of controversy at times around carbon offsets. But this is the general flow of how a carbon offset works. You donate some money to a broker who then funnels that money to a company that's doing offsetting their carbon projects, retiring the credits then, and that's all it's all part of becoming carbon neutral one way or another. It's certainly not meant as a catch-all, end-all and it's not meant for companies to abuse their emissions by buying these carbon offsets. It is really an effort to a temporary effort or temporary a temporary measure to offset carbon while they're working to get more carbon neutral. Basic steps, if you want to look at the enterprise itself, green IT plans, talk about them, try to get them front and center. A lot of times the organizations will appoint an energy czar or a green IT or environmental, a chief environmental officer to really get, that's a major commitment. And it signals, and a lot of major corporations like IBM and HP are doing that. Consolidate, virtualize, install energy efficient cooling, that measurement and optimize. Going back to Rich had posted the PUE, that's probably, power usage efficiency is probably the most utilized metric. Takes total facility power, divides that by the IT equipment power, and you get how much wattage you need to support. For instance, if it's a 2-to-1, you'll need 2 watts of power to support each 1 watt of. So the lower that PUE number is, the better off you are. I've seen some at 7, 8, 9. I've also seen some at 3 and 4, which is good. So again, measurements, and the measurements are only as good as what you use them for to manage and optimize. Deduplication is another thing. We've got too much duplication out there for data, so we get rid of some of that data. Maybe we can reduce some of those down to a petabyte instead of a zettabyte or exabyte. Also, that should be ROI. The ROI, you can look to rebates and incentives to prove how quickly your return on investment. So if you can get some rebates and incentives, it helps that ROI. So I see we're doing okay on time, but I'd like to leave a couple minutes for some questions. So this was a fire hose of green IT. The course in the fall will be at a much slower pace, but much more detailed. So we look forward to some of you joining us for that. Tell your coworkers if you are interested, if they're interested in green IT. Today we talked about the triple bottom line, sustainability, green IT, the importance of data centers and overall strategy, connecting IT with a project manager or with different projects. Just briefly, grenality is a term that we introduced in our book, and that's a degree to which an organization has considered sustainability over the entire project lifecycle and beyond. It is a measurement of how the organization is doing, and also think about the 4 R's of green IT: reuse, refurbish, recycle, redesign. And I'm going to turn this over back to Rich to talk a little bit about Greta, the grenality guru, which we just introduced today. And she will be providing some interesting data about the ICT industry itself. Rich.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Yeah, so Greta, the grenality guru, that's about as corny as we get, is a character we've introduced to discuss some of the interesting highlights that you can bring up to peers and managers if they're asking about, how much impact does this really have? And some of this information actually comes from GreenTouch, so you may want to check out greentouch.org. It's a nonprofit consortium of IT, mostly telecom, but also general IT players, many of whom are in competition with each other in general, but are in collaboration with each other for the effort that GreenTouch puts forward. So you'll have telecom companies like Alcatel-Lucent and Huawei, which normally are cutthroat competitors, working together on things like this BIPON, this bit interleaved passive optical network that I talked about. In any case, that's a good source for you. And here we're talking about ICT, which is kind of the intersection of any information and communications technology company. This industry is only 2% of the globe's total, so you wonder why we're even bothering. But it's still the same as the aviation industry, the entire aviation industry in terms of its carbon footprint, and it produces the same carbon effect as 50 million cars. So wouldn't it be great to take 50 million cars off the road in terms of carbon impact? If you were able to cut our ICT footprint that much, that's exactly what you'd be doing. One way to also put it into context, again, although it seems small, if the Internet, if you were to rename the Internet a country name like Webonia, and gave it country status, it would have the 5th place in terms of carbon emission between Japan and Russia. And in just a couple of years, 50% it's predicted of the world's electricity will be used to power basically all telecom and IT. So it's a big chunk, half of the world's electricity used for that. And our rate for consuming power for ICT is going up at 1,000 times over 20 years. Well, yes, we're working on efficiencies, but those are only going up at about 10 to 15% per year. So orders of magnitude too slow, if you will. Good facts here. Check out GreenTouch, and you'll be hearing more from Greta, the Grenality guru, until we run out of G's. So let's hand this back over to Catherine, so we can take a couple of questions in the remaining time.
Sure, and I know our numbers are dwindling here, so you can feel free to either unmute yourself and ask questions or put them in the chat. I know that Rakesh was asking a lot of questions, and I don't know if he's still on the line, about benchmarks and frameworks for return on investment and measures, KPIs, that organizations can use, because it seems that there's quite a, you mentioned from the very beginning the scope of what we're talking about here, right from the purchasing and thinking about the emissions and the carbon footprint and the material use and whatnot, right through to end of life of some of these things and their operation in between. What are some of the benchmarks you see companies using and KPIs that you see companies using?
Dave, do you want to mention anything? I mean, I can point to the ones I put in this chat bar as being important, but you have a little more background. Is there anything else besides those that I brought out?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself. There's also the carbon usage efficiencies. There's water usage effectiveness. So you can, there's a bunch of different, and unfortunately we probably don't have time to to go through all the calculations and talk about that. But PUE is the big one as far as efficiencies. And like I said before, if the closer to 1 you get, which is darn near impossible, says that for every watt of energy I'm producing, or for every watt of IT power I'm using, I only need 1 watt of support. So that's pretty impossible to achieve. But I've seen them. I've seen working at least to achieve a ratio of 3 or 2, 2.5, which would be I think 2.5 would be an excellent benchmark for a PUE. So, Rich, did you have anything additional you wanted to add?
No, I think I gave a link to a green grid presentation that had quite a bit of information on those measurements that you mentioned, and in fact, greengrid.org looks like a great source for, in some cases.
Is there an organization, like oftentimes the industry will actually establish sort of greener or sustainability criteria, which, you know, hardware and software could be built out or evaluated? Is there anyone doing anything like that?
I don't know for sure.
Rakesh
I haven't
saying
been able to find it.
Yep. Rakesh, do you want to, okay, for virtualization, can I unmute you and just see if you can talk about that at all? Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so we do this like a quarterly BNI report, and we use a model, I would say, provided by Greta from a virtualization perspective.
We can't hear you very well. If you could be a little louder. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I think there's something wrong with my mic.
That's okay. Now I can hear you.
Okay, so on a quarterly basis, we do gauge the kind of ROI we have achieved in virtualization space. So we use a model provided by Greta. So that is something. I was looking for more such examples that use. I think HP does one from printing space. So, yeah.
So you're saying that that HP has something as well? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, from a printer perspective.
Okay. And so is there any industry standard, or are they all sort of within the companies at this particular point?
That's what I am actually trying to understand. I'm actually engaging a lot of SMEs in this space and trying to understand, is there a benchmark, an industry model or standard that could be followed rather than going to individual vendor-specific solutions.
Yeah, because the vendor and the purchasing side of it to me is an interesting piece on, you know, if you're trying to suss out who you should be buying from or the specifications. Right. You know, do you use life cycle assessment as a criteria and try to compare those, or what do you include in the scope of that? I mean, it's one thing to say energy or emissions, but do you want to think about embedded water or, you know, the end of life? And yeah, there's just so much that can be brought into this discussion.
An interesting case study is from Dublin City Council in Ireland. If you Googled Dublin City Development Plan 2011 to 2017, there is an interesting case study on their approach all the way through from energy usage and sustainable society and software purchasing and a whole lot of, it's pretty extensive case study. And although they don't make any, that I know of, they don't make any benchmarking claims, it's interesting to look at what they considered as far as strategy all the way through there to make the whole city.
Can you repeat the name of the Dublin study? Because Linda would like to check that out.
Sure. It is Dublin City, let me find it again. I had it. Dublin City Council, or Dublin City Development Plan, 2011 to 2017.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Sarah must have seen that somewhere because she's already written it down. Are there any other final questions? Because we have gone past 1 o'clock now, and if there's any, you know, Sarah or Rakesh or Linda, do you have any things burning issues that you really wanted to have answered? Okay, seeing none, we're going to thank you very much, both Dave and Rich, for your presentation today, and we'll look forward to doing a deeper dive on this, taking it from you know, purchasing right through to end of life when we reconvene in October. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending. It's been wonderful to have you here. And we'll talk to you later.